The rifle shot echoed across the dusty Montana plains as Darcy Sullivan watched her last hope of dinner disappear into the brush. Her trembling hands could barely hold the old Winchester steady anymore, weakness making her vision blur. It had been 3 days since she'd eaten anything more substantial than a few wild berries, and the harsh winter of 1878 had left her pantry as barren as her husband's grave. Tears threatened to spill down her hollow cheeks as she trudged back toward the small homestead she'd shared with Thomas before the influenza took him last winter. The cattle had followed shortly after, victims of disease and the brutal cold. Now, at 23, Darcy found herself alone, hungry, and desperate as spring reluctantly arrived in the foothills outside Silver Creek. The small town itself was a day's ride away, but she couldn't bear to leave the home she and Thomas had built together. Each day she told herself tomorrow would be better, that something would change. But as she pushed open the weathered door to their cabin, the emptiness greeted her like an old, unwelcome friend. She slumped into the single chair by the cold hearth, her stomach twisting in pain. The rifle clattered to the floor as exhaustion overtook her. She was going to die here, she realized. Just like Thomas. Just like her dreams. Cole Matthews rode into Silver Creek with little more than the clothes on his back, a decent horse, and a desperate need for work. At 32, he'd spent more than half his life wandering from one cow town to another, never staying long enough to put down roots. The war had left him restless, and the decade since hadn't dulled his nightmares or his reluctance to call any place home. The main street was bustling with the usual activity of a frontier town that had managed to survive its wild early days and settle into something resembling civilization. Men in dusty hats nodded as he passed, women hurried about their errands, and children darted between wagons and horses with reckless abandon. Cole dismounted outside the general store, tying his bay gelding to the hitching post before pushing his way inside. The bell above the door announced his arrival, drawing the attention of the portly shopkeeper arranging canned goods on a shelf. "Afternoon," the man said, eyeing Cole with the careful appraisal shopkeepers reserved for strangers. "Something I can help you with?" "Looking for work," Cole replied, removing his hat and running a hand through his dark hair. "Figured this might be a good place to ask around." The shopkeeper's expression softened slightly. "Name's Walter Pearson. Own this establishment. Cole Matthews." He extended his hand, which Walter shook firmly. "Actually might be in need of someone," Walter said thoughtfully. "My delivery boy joined up with a cattle drive heading north last week. Pays not much, but it's honest work." Cole nodded. "I'll take it. Any other jobs available in town? Willing to work wherever there's need." Walter raised an eyebrow. "Desperate times? Just passing through, but I'd like to stay a spell. Build up a stake." The shopkeeper seemed to consider this. "Sheriff might need a deputy. And I heard Doc Wilson's been looking for someone to help around his place, since his back's been giving him trouble." Cole nodded. "Appreciate the information." As Walter began explaining the delivery routes, the door opened again. A well-dressed older woman entered, her gray hair pinned neatly beneath a fashionable hat. She approached the counter with purpose, interrupting their conversation without apology. "Walter, I need to speak with you about the Sullivan woman." Walter's expression turned grave. "Mrs. Hargrove, this is Cole Matthews. Just hired him for deliveries." Mrs. Hargrove gave Cole a cursory glance before continuing. "I rode past the Sullivan place yesterday. That poor girl is wasting away to nothing. Thomas has been gone 4 months now, and she refuses to leave that ramshackle cabin. Darcy's a proud woman," Walter said quietly. "Won't take charity. Pride won't fill her belly," Mrs. Hargrove snapped. "She can barely stand from what I saw. Thin as a rail." Cole found himself drawn into the conversation despite his usual tendency to avoid other people's troubles. "This woman lives alone?" Mrs. Hargrove turned to him, seeming to truly see him for the first time. "Young widow. Husband died of influenza this past winter. They were trying to make a go of it with a small cattle operation, but they lost most of their herd. She's got nothing now, but she's too stubborn to ask for help. An uncomfortable feeling settled in Cole's chest. He'd seen too many graves on the frontier, too many dreams withered by hardship and circumstance. "Where's her place?" he asked, surprising himself. Walter and Mrs. Hargrove exchanged glances. "About 15 miles north," Walter said. "Near Elk Creek." Cole nodded, settling his hat back on his head. "I'll take that delivery job. And if you don't mind, I'd like to make my first run out to the Sullivan place." Walter's eyes narrowed slightly. "She won't take charity, like I said." "Then I won't call it charity." Cole's voice was firm. "I'll call it a delivery." The ride to Darcy Sullivan's homestead took Cole through rolling grasslands dotted with spring wildflowers. In other circumstances, he might have appreciated the beauty of Montana territory, but his mind was occupied with the supplies loaded in his saddlebags: flour, salt pork, coffee, and beans. Not much, but enough to keep someone from starving. The cabin came into view as he crested a small rise. It was a modest structure, but solidly built, with a small corral off to one side and the skeletal remains of what had once been a vegetable garden. A thin wisp of smoke rose from the chimney, the only sign of life. Cole dismounted, approaching the door with careful steps. He knocked twice, waiting for a response that didn't come. After a moment's hesitation, he knocked again, louder. "Mrs. Sullivan?" he called. "Delivery from Pearson's General Store." He heard movement inside, then the sound of something falling. Concern overrode courtesy, and he pushed the door open, stepping into the dim interior. The cabin was neat but sparse, containing only the essential furnishings. A woman lay crumpled on the floor near a table, trying to push herself upright. Even in the poor light, Cole could see she was dangerously thin, her dress hanging loosely on her frame. He rushed forward, kneeling beside her. "Madam, are you all right?" Darcy looked up at the stranger with wide, blue eyes set in a too-pale face. Her chestnut hair hung in a loose braid over one shoulder, and despite her obvious weakness, there was a fierce dignity in her expression. "Who are you?" she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Cole Matthews, madam. I work for Mr. Pearson now. Brought your delivery." Confusion clouded her features. "I didn't order anything." Cole gently helped her to her feet, guiding her to the single chair by the hearth. "Mr. Pearson mentioned you had an outstanding account. Asked me to bring these supplies out to you." It was a lie, and from the skepticism in her eyes, she knew it. But she was too weak to argue as Cole moved to the hearth, adding wood to the dying embers and coaxing the fire back to life. "I don't have money to pay for supplies," she said finally, watching as he unpacked the saddlebags. Cole kept his voice casual. "Mr. Pearson said not to worry about that for now. Said you and your husband were good customers." Darcy's thin hands twisted in her lap. "My husband is dead." "I'm sorry to hear that, madam." "You can stop with the madam. My name is Darcy." Pride straightened her shoulders despite her weakness. "And I don't take charity." Cole met her gaze steadily. "It's not charity when you're planning to pay it back. And I reckon you will, once you're back on your feet." He turned away before she could argue further, focusing on preparing a simple meal from the supplies he'd brought. Soon, the small cabin filled with the aroma of frying salt pork and heating beans. When he placed a plate before her, Darcy stared at it for a long moment, tears welling in her eyes. She looked up at him, a mixture of gratitude and shame on her face. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. Cole shrugged, uncomfortable with the question. "Seems like the right thing to do." She ate slowly, with careful deliberation, like someone who knew the dangers of eating too quickly after near starvation. Cole busied himself organizing the remaining supplies, giving her privacy while she ate. "Thank you," she said when she finished, setting the plate aside. But I meant what I said. I'll pay back every cent. Cole nodded, respecting her determination. I've got to get back to town. Is there anything else you need before I go? Darcy shook her head, then seemed to reconsider. Actually, if you're serious about working for Mr. Pearson, could you tell him I'm looking for work too? Any kind of work. You should focus on regaining your strength. I need to earn my keep, she insisted. I won't be indebted to anyone. Cole recognized the stubborn set of her jaw. I'll tell him, but promise me you'll eat regular meals. Can't work if you're too weak to stand. A hint of color touched her cheeks. I promise. As Cole rode back to Silver Creek, his thoughts remained with the proud, stubborn woman in the lonely cabin. He'd seen that same determination in soldiers during the war, men who refused to acknowledge defeat even as it stared them in the face. Sometimes it saved them. Sometimes it killed them. He hoped Darcy Sullivan would be one of the survivors. The following morning found Cole at the sheriff's office, hat in hand as he stood before Sheriff James Murphy. The lawman was in his 50s, with iron-gray hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades under the Montana sun. Mr. Pearson mentioned you might need a deputy, Cole said after introducing himself. Murphy leaned back in his chair, assessing Cole with shrewd eyes. Got experience with a badge?
No, sir.
But I served in the war, and I've worked as a ranch hand, cowpuncher, and scout. I know how to handle myself. War changes a man, Murphy observed. Which side? Union. The sheriff nodded slowly. Silver Creek's mostly peaceful these days, but we get our share of trouble when the cattle drives come through or the miners hit town after months in the hills. Could use someone to help with night patrols and keep an eye on things when I need to ride out to the outlying homesteads. I'm interested, Cole said. But I should mention I've already taken a job with Mr. Pearson making deliveries. Murphy raised an eyebrow. Man needs 2 jobs? Cole hesitated, then decided on honesty. I'm trying to help someone who's fallen on hard times. Need the extra money. The Sullivan widow, Murphy said. Not a question. Cole's surprise must have shown on his face, because the sheriff chuckled. Small town. Word travels. Mrs. Hargrove's been trying to organize aid for that young woman for months, but from what I hear, Mrs. Sullivan won't accept it. She's proud, Cole agreed. But she's also starving. Murphy studied him for a long moment. Deputy position is yours if you want it. Pays $30 a month, plus room at the boarding house. I need someone for night patrols mainly. 4 nights a week, sundown to sunrise. I'll take it, Cole said without hesitation. Curious thing, Murphy mused, opening a drawer to retrieve a deputy's badge. Man taking 2 jobs to help a woman he just met. Cole accepted the badge, his expression neutral. Just doing what needs doing, Sheriff. Murphy didn't look convinced. Well, report back here at sundown. I'll show you the rounds. Cole's next stop was the doctor's office, a well-maintained building on the quieter end of the main street. Doc Wilson proved to be a harried-looking man in his 60s, with spectacles perched on the end of his nose, and a perpetually distracted air. Need help, you say? The doctor asked, barely looking up from the medical text he was consulting. What kind of experience do you have? None with medicine, Cole admitted. But I'm strong, reliable, and I learn quick. Doc Wilson finally looked at him properly. Mainly need someone for physical tasks. Chopping wood, fetching supplies, sometimes helping move patients. My back's not what it used to be. I can handle that. Pays not much. $10 a week, but it's only a few hours each day. Cole nodded. That works fine. I've taken on deputy duties and deliveries for Mr. Pearson as well. The doctor's eyebrows shot up. 3 jobs? You must be saving for something important. Cole didn't correct the assumption. When would you need me? Mornings mainly. Say 6 to 9 before my regular patients start arriving. I'll be here tomorrow at 6, Cole promised. As he left the doctor's office, Cole did a quick calculation in his head. Between the 3 jobs, he'd be earning enough to support himself and help Darcy get back on her feet. The deputy position provided lodging, which meant most of his earnings could go toward supplies for her homestead. It would mean long days and little sleep, but he was no stranger to hard work. And the image of Darcy's proud, starving face haunted him in a way he couldn't easily explain. 3 days later, Cole made his second delivery to the Sullivan homestead, this time with a wagon borrowed from Walter Pearson. Besides food supplies, he'd brought tools, seeds for planting, and materials to repair the corral and roof. He found Darcy outside, attempting to turn over soil in what had once been a vegetable garden. She looked marginally better than when he'd first met her, but still far too thin, and she leaned heavily on the hoe as he approached. "Mr. Matthews," she greeted him, straightening with visible effort. "Another delivery I didn't order?" Despite her words, there was less hostility in her tone than before, and something that might have been the ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Mr. Pearson sends his regards," Cole said, jumping down from the wagon. "And a job offer, if you're still interested." Darcy's eyes lit up. "Truly?" Cole nodded. "He needs someone to help with the bookkeeping." "Said you used to be a schoolteacher before you married?" "Yes," in Helena. Hope and suspicion warred on her face. "Did you arrange this?" "Just passed along your request for work," Cole said, which was mostly true. He'd also spent an hour convincing Walter that Darcy's education would be valuable to his business, but she didn't need to know that. "When can I start?" "Once you're strong enough to make the trip to town." Cole gestured to the garden. "Which is why I brought supplies. You need to eat properly before you can work." Darcy looked at the loaded wagon, her pride battling with practicality. "I can't accept all this." "It's an investment," Cole said firmly. "Walter's investing in his future bookkeeper. I'm investing in the meals you'll cook me when I come out here to help with repairs. Everyone benefits." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're a stubborn man, Mr. Matthews." "Cole," he corrected. "And I've been called worse." For the first time, Darcy smiled fully, transforming her face from merely pretty to strikingly beautiful despite her gauntness. "All right, Cole. I accept your investment, but I expect detailed accounting of everything I owe." "Fair enough." He gestured to the garden tools in the wagon. "Now, how about I help you with that garden? You're more likely to get vegetables if the seeds actually go in the ground." Darcy laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise her as much as it pleased him. "Are you questioning my farming abilities?" "I'm questioning your strength at the moment," he said gently. "Save it for when you need it." She relented, allowing him to take over the heavy work of preparing the soil while she sorted through the seed packets he'd brought. They worked side by side through the afternoon, and Cole found himself enjoying her company more than he'd expected. Darcy proved to be intelligent and well-read, with opinions on everything from politics to literature. As her initial wariness faded, she revealed a quick wit and a resilience that impressed him. By the time the garden was planted, Cole had learned about her childhood in Illinois, her journey west to teach in Montana Territory, and her whirlwind romance with Thomas Sullivan. "We had such plans," she said softly as they sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson. "Thomas was going to build the herd, and I was going to start a small school for the children of nearby homesteaders. We talked about having children of our own." She trailed off, looking away. "You still could," Cole said carefully. "Have a school, I mean, once you're back on your feet." Darcy glanced at him, then back at the horizon. "Perhaps. But first I need to survive, and thanks to you, that seems more likely than it did a week ago." "You'd have found a way," Cole said. "You're too stubborn to give up." "Maybe." She hesitated, then asked, "Why are you doing all this, Cole?" "The truth this time." He considered deflecting again, but found he couldn't lie to her direct gaze. "I've seen too many good people broken by circumstances. During the war, after it. People who deserved better than what life handed them." So, I'm a charity case after all, she said, but there was no bite to her words.
No, Cole replied firmly.
You're someone worth helping. There's a difference. Darcy studied him for a long moment, then nodded, accepting his answer. I should start dinner. Will you stay? I have to get back for my shift as deputy, he said regretfully. But I'll be back in a few days with more supplies. As he prepared to leave, loading the empty crates back into the wagon, Darcy approached him with a small bundle wrapped in cloth. I baked bread this morning, she said, offering it to him. It's not much, but... Well, you should eat too. Cole accepted the bundle, touched by the gesture. Thank you. It's an investment, she said with a hint of mischief. In my future delivery man. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Cole rose before dawn to work for Doc Wilson, chopping wood, cleaning the surgery, and occasionally helping with patients. By 9, he was at the general store, loading deliveries that would take him through the afternoon. 3 nights a week, he patrolled Silver Creek as deputy, watching over the saloons and breaking up the occasional fight. Every third day, he made the journey to Darcy's homestead, bringing supplies and staying to help with repairs. Together they mended the roof, fixed the corral, and tended the growing garden. Each visit, he noted improvements in her health and spirits. The hollow look began to leave her eyes, and her dresses no longer hung quite so loosely on her frame. During one visit in late May, Cole arrived to find Darcy outside with a shotgun, taking careful aim at tin cans arranged on the corral fence. She fired, missing by several inches, then muttered something under her breath that no former schoolteacher should know. Your stance is off, Cole called as he approached. And you're anticipating the recoil. Darcy turned, lowering the shotgun. I need to learn to hunt. Can't rely on deliveries forever. Hunting's a good skill, he agreed, dismounting. But you need the right weapon. That's scatterguns for close work, not distance shooting. It's all I have, she admitted. Thomas's rifle. I had to sell it. During the winter.
Cole nodded, understanding.
Let me show you how to make the most of what you've got, then. He spent the afternoon teaching her proper shooting techniques, standing close behind her to adjust her stance and grip. The proximity was distracting in ways he hadn't anticipated, and from the slight flush on Darcy's cheeks when their hands touched, he suspected she felt it too. By sundown, she was hitting her targets more often than not, and the triumphant smile she gave him when she shattered 3 cans in succession made something twist pleasantly in his chest. You're a good teacher, she said as they walked back to the cabin. Had a good student, he replied. Quick learner. Inside, as they shared a simple meal of rabbit stew, Darcy's first successful hunt from the previous day, she brought up a subject that had clearly been on her mind. I'm strong enough to start work now, she said. I'd like to go to town with you tomorrow, speak to Mr. Pearson about that bookkeeping position. Cole studied her, noting the healthy color in her cheeks and the determined set of her shoulders. She was still thin but no longer dangerously so. I think that's a fine idea. I'll need to find lodging in town, she continued. Can't make the journey back and forth every day. Mrs. Henderson runs a respectable boarding house for women, Cole suggested. It's affordable and not far from the store. Darcy nodded, pushing her empty bowl aside. This means I'll be leaving the homestead. There was a weight to her words that Cole understood. This cabin represented her life with Thomas, her dreams and plans. Leaving, even temporarily, meant acknowledging that life was gone. You're not abandoning it, he said gently. Just adapting. The cabin will still be here when you want to return. She gave him a grateful look. You always know what to say. Not always, he admitted, but I'm trying. The next morning, they rode to Silver Creek together, Darcy wearing her best dress and a determined expression. Cole watched as she squared her shoulders before entering the general store, transforming from the vulnerable woman he'd first met into someone poised and professional. Walter Pearson was clearly impressed by her knowledge and quick mind, agreeing to hire her on the spot. The wage was modest, but combined with room and board at Mrs. Henderson's, it would allow Darcy to begin rebuilding her life. "I don't know how to thank you," she told Cole as they stood outside the store afterward. "For everything." "Seeing you like this is thanks enough," he said honestly. "You look alive again." A soft smile curved her lips. "I feel alive. For the first time since Thomas died." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, and Cole felt a familiar tightening in his chest. He cleared his throat, breaking the connection. "I should get you settled at Mrs. Henderson's, then start my deliveries." As they walked down the main street, Darcy's hand brushed against his, perhaps accidentally. Neither acknowledged it, but neither moved away either. June brought scorching heat to Montana territory, and with it, new developments in Silver Creek. A cattle drive from Texas arrived, bringing cowboys with money to spend and energy to burn. The saloons did brisk business, and Cole's duties as deputy became more demanding as drunken brawls and rowdy behavior increased. Darcy thrived in her position at the general store. Walter praised her organizational skills and her ability to manage the accounts more efficiently than he ever had. She settled into a room at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, making friends with the other women and becoming part of the town's social fabric. Cole still made regular trips to her homestead, tending the garden and making repairs to ensure the property didn't fall into disrepair. Sometimes Darcy accompanied him, spending weekends at the cabin and enjoying the fruits of their labor as the garden produced an abundance of vegetables. On one such weekend in late June, they sat on the porch after a long day of work, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. Cole had repaired the porch swing, and they sat side by side, gently rocking. "I've been thinking," Darcy said, breaking a comfortable silence, "about the future." Cole glanced at her, noting how the fading light gilded her profile. "What about it?" "I can't keep the homestead forever, not by myself." Her voice was calm, practical. "But I don't want to sell it either. It's all I have left of Thomas." "You don't need to decide anything yet," Cole said. "You're doing well in town. The garden here is producing. There's no rush." Darcy turned to face him, her expression serious. "Cole, why haven't you moved on? You said you were just passing through, building up a stake. It's been nearly 2 months." The question caught him off guard, though he'd asked himself the same thing many times. "I suppose I found reasons to stay." "What reasons?" she pressed. Cole looked away, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "The jobs are steady. The town's decent. I like the people." "Any people in particular?" Her voice was soft, almost teasing. He met her gaze then, finding it impossible to dissemble. "You know there is." The admission hung between them, changing the atmosphere as surely as if a storm had rolled in. Darcy's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't look away. "Cole," she began, but whatever she intended to say was interrupted by the distant sound of approaching horses. Both of them tensed, alert to the unusual occurrence. Visitors were rare at the isolated homestead, especially after dark. Cole stood, instinctively moving in front of Darcy as 3 riders emerged from the gathering darkness. "Stay here," he murmured, hand moving to the revolver at his hip. The riders approached at a leisurely pace, not the hurried advance of those with ill intent. As they drew closer, Cole recognized the lead rider as Sheriff Murphy, with 2 strangers flanking him. "Evening, Matthews," Murphy called as they reached the yard. "Mrs. Sullivan." "Sheriff," Cole acknowledged. "Didn't expect to see you out this way." Murphy dismounted, gesturing for his companions to do the same. "These gentlemen were asking after Mrs. Sullivan in town. Thought I'd escort them out here myself, make proper introductions." The 2 strangers removed their hats, revealing familial similarities in their features. Both were well-dressed, with the prosperous look of successful businessmen rather than frontiersmen. "Mrs. Sullivan," the older of the two said, stepping forward. I'm Daniel Prescott, and this is my brother William. We're Thomas's cousins from Boston. Darcy stiffened beside Cole. Thomas never mentioned cousins in Boston. We lost touch many years ago, Daniel explained. When Thomas headed west. Our father and his had a falling out over business matters. We only learned of his passing recently, William added. Through business contacts in Helena. We came as soon as we could. Cole studied the men carefully, noting their expensive clothes and Eastern mannerisms. Something about the situation made him uneasy, though he couldn't pinpoint why. Perhaps we could speak inside? Daniel suggested, glancing at the cabin. Darcy hesitated, then nodded, her natural hospitality overcoming her surprise. Of course. Please come in. Once inside, with coffee brewing on the stove, the Prescott brothers explained their presence more fully. They had indeed only recently learned of Thomas's death and had traveled to Montana to settle family matters. Thomas was the last of his direct line, Daniel said, which makes his property part of the extended family estate, according to our grandfather's will. Darcy's hands tightened around her coffee cup. I don't understand. William produced a folded document from his coat pocket. This is a copy of the relevant section of Grandfather Prescott's will. All property belonging to male heirs was to remain within the family bloodline, passing to the closest male relative in the event of death without issue. You're saying I have no claim to my husband's land. Darcy's voice was steady, but Cole could see the tension in her shoulders. Not legally, no, Daniel said, with a sympathetic expression that didn't reach his eyes. However, we're prepared to offer you fair compensation for any improvements you've made to the property and, of course, for your personal belongings. Cole saw the flash of anger in Darcy's eyes before she carefully schooled her features. I see. And what is your definition of fair compensation? We were thinking $200, William said smoothly. Quite generous, considering the remote location and modest improvements. Sheriff Murphy, who had been silent until now, frowned. The land alone is worth more than that, even out here. The land belongs to the Prescott Family Trust, Daniel said firmly. We're only compensating Mrs. Sullivan for her personal investment. Cole watched as Darcy set down her cup with deliberate care. Gentlemen, this is quite unexpected. I'll need time to consider your offer. Of course, Daniel said. We're staying in Silver Creek for the week. The Westward Hotel. We'll need your decision by Friday, William added. Our business in Montana is limited, and we must return east. After the Prescotts and Sheriff Murphy departed, promising to return the following day for further discussion, Darcy stood motionless in the center of the cabin, her face pale in the lamplight. Darcy. Cole approached her cautiously. Are you all right? They want to take everything, she said, her voice barely audible. Everything Thomas and I built together. Everything we dreamed of. We don't know if their claim is legitimate, Cole pointed out. That document could be forged, and even if it's real, there might be ways to contest it. Darcy looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. $200 for 3 years of my life. For all our hopes and plans. Without thinking, Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her as the tears finally spilled over. She clung to him, her body shaking with silent sobs. We'll fight this, he promised, his lips against her hair. I won't let them take your home. When her tears subsided, Darcy pulled back slightly, looking up at him with reddened eyes. Why do you care so much, Cole? About me, about this place? The question hung between them, demanding truth. Cole reached up to brush a tear from her cheek, his touch lingering. Because I've never met anyone like you, he said simply. Someone so determined, so brave. Someone who faces the worst life can throw at her and still stands tall. Someone who makes me want to be better than I am. Darcy's breath caught. Cole. I know it's too soon, he continued quickly. I know you're still grieving Thomas, but I can't pretend I don't feel something for you, Darcy. Something I wasn't expecting to feel ever again. For a long moment, she was silent, and Cole feared he'd overstepped. Then, slowly, she raised her hand to his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "It's not too soon," she whispered. "Thomas would want me to be happy. To live, not just survive." Cole covered her hand with his own. "And, do I make you happy?" "Yes," she admitted, a small smile breaking through her tears. "More than I thought possible." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Her lips were soft beneath his, hesitant at first, then responding with increasing warmth. Cole kept the kiss gentle, mindful of her emotional state and the newness between them. When they finally parted, Darcy rested her forehead against his chest, her arms around his waist. "I still have to deal with the Prescotts." "We'll deal with them," Cole corrected. "Together." The next morning, Cole rode into Silver Creek earlier than usual, leaving Darcy at the homestead with a promise to return by midday. His first stop was the sheriff's office, where Murphy was already at his desk, nursing a cup of coffee. "Figured you'd be by," the sheriff said by way of greeting. "Coffee." Cole nodded, taking the offered cup. "What do you know about the Prescotts?" Murphy leaned back in his chair. "Not much. They arrived 3 days ago, asking questions about Thomas Sullivan and his widow. Showed papers that looked official enough. Said they were family looking to settle matters. You believe them?" The sheriff shrugged. "No reason not to, on the face of it. But something doesn't sit right. They were awful quick to find their way here, for men who supposedly just learned about a distant cousin's death." Cole sipped his coffee, considering. "I need to send a telegram to Boston. Find out if the Prescott family is legitimate." "Good idea," Murphy agreed. "And while you're at it, might want to check with Judge Hollister. He'll know if their legal claim holds water." An hour later, Cole had sent his telegram and was sitting in Judge Hollister's office, a small room attached to the town hall. The judge was an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered despite his 70 years, with a shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes. "Prescott Family Trust, you say?" The judge frowned, tapping his fingers on the desk. "I'm not familiar with any such arrangement affecting property rights in this territory." They showed a document, Cole explained, something about the grandfather's will dictating that property must stay with male heirs. Judge Hollister's frown deepened. Possible but unusual. And even if such a provision exists in their family documents, it would be subject to territorial law. Mrs. Sullivan, as Thomas's widow, has clear rights to the homestead under the Homestead Act. They filed their claim jointly, I presume? "I believe so," Cole said. "Thomas and Darcy came here together 3 years ago. Then her name should be on the deed alongside his." The judge stood, moving to a filing cabinet. "Let me check the records." After several minutes of searching, Judge Hollister retrieved a document, studying it carefully. "Yes, here it is. The Sullivan homestead was registered jointly to Thomas and Darcy Sullivan in June of 1875. Under territorial law, the surviving spouse inherits the deceased's portion automatically." Relief flooded through Cole. "So the Prescotts have no claim?" "Not on the homestead itself, no." The judge returned to his desk. "If Thomas had other assets, money, investments, personal property he inherited from family, those might be subject to prior arrangements. But land claimed under the Homestead Act follows different rules." Cole stood, extending his hand. "Thank you, Judge. This will be a weight off Mrs. Sullivan's mind." "Bring her to see me," the judge advised. "I'll explain everything and provide copies of the relevant documents." "And Matthews?" "If these men continue to press their claim after being informed of the legal situation, let me know. Attempting to defraud a widow is a serious matter." By midday, Cole had completed his errands and was riding back to Darcy's homestead, a sense of satisfaction warming him despite the scorching June sun. The telegram to Boston would take time for a response, but Judge Hollister's confirmation of Darcy's legal rights was enough to counter the Prescotts' immediate threat. He found Darcy in the garden, harvesting early peas and radishes. She straightened as he approached, shading her eyes against the sun. "Any news?" she called. Cole dismounted, taking off his hat as he joined her among the neat rows of vegetables. "Good news. According to Judge Hollister, the homestead is legally yours. Your name is on the deed alongside Thomas's, and territorial law protects your right to it." Darcy's face lit up with relief. "Are you certain? What about their family trust?" "The judge says it doesn't matter. Land claimed under the Homestead Act follows territorial law, not family arrangements." Cole took her hands, dirty from gardening, and all the more beautiful for it. "The homestead is yours, Darcy. They can't take it from you." She flung her arms around his neck. Heedless of the dirt, she transferred to his shirt. Cole laughed, lifting her off her feet in an exuberant embrace. "What do we do now?" she asked as he set her down. "The Prescotts will be back. Now we prepare to face them with the truth," Cole said firmly. "Judge Hollister wants to meet with you to provide official copies of your deed and explain your legal rights. And I've sent a telegram to Boston, asking about the Prescott family." Darcy's expression sobered. "You think they're not who they claim to be? I think it's worth confirming their story before they leave town." Cole touched her cheek gently. "But even if they are Thomas's cousins, they have no claim on your land." The Prescott brothers returned that evening as promised. Cole and Darcy received them on the porch, a deliberate choice that kept the men outside the intimate space of the cabin. "We've considered your offer," Darcy said once pleasantries had been exchanged, her voice steady and confident. "And we must decline." Daniel Prescott raised an eyebrow. "We? I was under the impression you were a widow, Mrs. Sullivan." "Mrs. Sullivan has consulted with me as a friend and as Silver Creek's deputy," Cole said evenly. "And with Judge Hollister, who confirms that the homestead legally belongs to Mrs. Sullivan under territorial law." William Prescott's face darkened. "The family trust has no bearing on land claimed under the Homestead Act," Darcy interrupted. "My name is on the deed alongside Thomas's. The judge has provided documentation confirming my ownership." She held out the papers Judge Hollister had given her that afternoon. Daniel took them, scanning them with narrowed eyes before passing them to his brother. "This changes nothing," Daniel insisted. "Our grandfathers will predate your territorial laws." "That's not how the law works, Mr. Prescott," Cole said mildly. "But if you wish to contest it, you're welcome to present your case to Judge Hollister. He'll be available tomorrow morning at the town hall." The brothers exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Cole noticed William's hand drift toward his coat pocket, then stop as he caught Cole watching him. "Perhaps we've been hasty," Daniel said smoothly. "Family matters are complicated. We should review the legal situation more thoroughly." "Yes," Darcy agreed. "You should. And while you're at it, you might explain how Thomas's cousins knew to look for him in Montana Territory when he left no forwarding address with family in the East." A tense silence followed her challenge. Cole shifted slightly, positioning himself more directly between Darcy and the Prescotts. "We traced him through business records," William said finally. "Our family has connections." "Interesting," Cole remarked. "Because I sent a telegram to Boston this morning, inquiring about the Prescott family and their connection to Thomas Sullivan. I expect a response tomorrow." Daniel's expression hardened. "You're overstepping, Deputy. This is a family matter." "A family matter involving potential fraud against a citizen of Silver Creek," Cole countered. "Which makes it my concern." For a moment, Cole thought William might reach for the weapon he suspected was hidden in the man's coat. Instead, Daniel placed a restraining hand on his brother's arm. "We'll meet with the judge tomorrow," Daniel said, his tone clipped. "Good evening, Mrs. Sullivan."
"Deputy."
As the men rode away, Darcy released a shaky breath. Do you think they'll actually go to the judge? No, Cole said, watching the retreating figures. I think they'll be gone by morning. But just in case, I'll ask Sheriff Murphy to keep an eye on them. His prediction proved correct. By dawn, the Prescott brothers had vanished from Silver Creek, leaving their hotel bill unpaid and no forwarding address. 2 days later, a telegram arrived from Boston confirming Cole's suspicions. There was no record of a Prescott family connected to Thomas Sullivan, and the address the men had provided belonged to an abandoned warehouse. Con men, Sheriff Murphy concluded when Cole reported the findings. Likely heard about a widow living alone on a valuable homestead and thought they'd try their luck. They picked the wrong widow, Cole said, unable to keep the pride from his voice. Murphy gave him a knowing look. Indeed they did, especially since she's got a certain deputy looking out for her interests.
Cole didn't deny it.
She's special, Sheriff. I can see that. Murphy studied him for a moment. You're working yourself to exhaustion with these 3 jobs, son. Might be time to consider your priorities. The sheriff's words stayed with Cole as he went about his duties that day. He was tired, there was no denying it. Between the pre-dawn hours at Doc Wilson's, the deliveries for Walter Pearson, and the night patrols as deputy, he barely had time to sleep, let alone think about the future. But each job served a purpose. The work for Doc Wilson provided cash for immediate needs. The deputy position gave him lodging and respectability. And the deliveries for Walter allowed him regular contact with Darcy, both at the store and on his trips to her homestead. As July arrived with its sweltering heat and violent thunderstorms, Cole found himself at a crossroads. His feelings for Darcy had deepened into something he could no longer ignore or deny. When they were together, whether working side by side in her garden or sharing quiet conversations on her porch, he felt a contentment he'd never experienced before. But he was also aware of the complexities of their situation. Darcy was still healing from Thomas's death, still finding her footing as an independent woman. And Cole himself had never planned to stay in Silver Creek permanently. The restlessness that had driven him for years was quieter now, but not entirely gone. One evening in mid-July, Cole found himself at the saloon after his deputy shift ended, nursing a whiskey and turning these thoughts over in his mind. Sheriff Murphy joined him, ordering his own drink before settling into the chair opposite. "You look like a man wrestling with his conscience," the sheriff observed. Cole smiled faintly. "Something like that." "Woman troubles?" "Not exactly." Cole swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "More like future troubles." Murphy nodded sagely.
Ah.
Wondering whether to move on or put down roots. Common affliction in these parts. Is it that obvious? To someone who's seen it before. The sheriff sipped his whiskey. "You know, I was a drifter once. Spent 15 years moving from town to town, never staying more than a season anywhere." Cole looked up, surprised. "What changed?" "Met my Sarah in a little town in Colorado. She ran the local cafe."
A fond smile crossed Murphy's weathered face.
"Stubborn woman. Wouldn't marry me unless I promised to stop wandering. Said she wasn't interested in loving a tumbleweed. So you stayed." "Best decision I ever made." Murphy's expression grew serious. "Lost her 10 years ago to pneumonia. But we had 20 good years together, raised 2 fine sons who've got families of their own now." Cole was silent, considering the sheriff's words. "Life's short, son," Murphy continued. "Too short to waste wondering what if. If you've found something worth staying for, or someone, my advice is to grab hold with both hands." Later that night, unable to sleep despite his exhaustion, Cole made a decision. He would speak to Darcy, lay his cards on the table. If she felt as he did, they would find a way forward together. If not, he would respect her wishes and step back. The opportunity came the following Sunday when he accompanied Darcy back to her homestead for their now regular weekend visit. The garden was flourishing, producing more vegetables than Darcy could use. She had begun selling the excess to Walter Pearson, creating a small but steady income beyond her wages at the store. They spent the morning harvesting tomatoes, green beans, and summer squash, working in comfortable silence broken by occasional conversation. By midday, with the sun high and hot, they retreated to the shade of the porch with glasses of cool water. "I've been thinking," Darcy said, wiping perspiration from her brow, "about the future." Cole's heart quickened. "What about it?" "I want to keep the homestead," she said decisively. "Not just as a memory of Thomas, but as my home. Our home, I mean mine and his. But I also enjoy my work in town, the independence of it." She looked at him, her blue eyes clear and direct. "I've been wondering if there's a way to have both." "There might be," Cole said carefully, "if you had help." Darcy set her glass down, turning to face him fully. "Cole, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer." "Always. Are you planning to stay in Silver Creek? Or will you move on eventually, like you originally intended?" The directness of her question took him by surprise, though it shouldn't have. Darcy had never been one to shy away from difficult conversations. "I came to Silver Creek intending to pass through," he admitted. "But that was before I met you." He reached for her hand, taking it gently in his. "I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you, Darcy. I've been working 3 jobs, not just to help you, but because for the first time in my life, I'm thinking about a future. A real future, in one place." Hope blossomed in her eyes. "With me? If you'll have me," he said simply. "I know it hasn't been long, and I know you're still healing from losing Thomas. I don't want to rush you. But I also don't want to pretend that what's growing between us isn't real." Darcy's fingers tightened around his. "It's real," she whispered. "I've felt it too. And yes, I still mourn Thomas. I always will, in some way. But my heart has room for new love, too. For you." Cole released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Then we'll find a way to make it work. The homestead, the town, all of it."
How? Darcy asked.
"I can't be in 2 places at once, and neither can you, especially working 3 jobs." "I've been thinking about that," Cole said. "What if I gave up the deputy position and the work for Doc Wilson? Focused on the deliveries for Walter, expanded the routes to include the outlying homesteads. Could you make enough that way?" "With what I've saved, and what the routes could bring in, yes." Cole's mind raced ahead, plans forming and solidifying. "I could build up the delivery business, maybe add freight hauling between Silver Creek and Helena. And here at the homestead, we could expand the garden, maybe even start a small herd again eventually."
"We?"
Darcy's voice was soft, questioning. Cole met her gaze steadily. "I'm asking if you'll marry me, Darcy. Not today, not tomorrow, but when you're ready. When we're both ready." Tears welled in her eyes, but her smile was radiant. "Yes," she said simply. "When we're ready, yes." He kissed her then, a promise sealed with the taste of summer on their lips. When they parted, Darcy rested her head against his shoulder, and they sat in companionable silence, watching the afternoon shadows lengthen across the land that would be their home. Autumn arrived in a blaze of gold and crimson, transforming the Montana landscape into a painter's dream. Darcy and Cole were married on a crisp October day, with the aspen trees shimmering like spun gold in the breeze. The ceremony was small, held on the porch of their homestead with Judge Hollister officiating and the citizens of Silver Creek bearing witness. Walter Pearson stood up for Cole, while Mrs. Henderson, who had become like a mother to Darcy during her time at the boarding house, stood with her. Sheriff Murphy and his deputies provided an impromptu honor guard, and Doc Wilson, who had initially grumbled about losing his morning help, presented the couple with a fine set of medical supplies for their remote home. "Never know when you might need stitching up out here," the doctor said gruffly, though his eyes were suspiciously bright as he handed over the package. After the ceremony and the celebration that followed, As the guests departed and dusk settled over the land, Darcy and Cole stood on their porch, arms around each other's waists. "Mrs. Matthews," Cole murmured, testing the sound of her new name. Darcy smiled up at him. "Mr. Matthews," she returned. "Husband." "Wife," he countered, his voice warm with emotion. They had decided to make the homestead their primary residence, with Cole continuing his delivery routes and Darcy traveling to town 3 days a week to work at the store. Walter had been surprisingly supportive of the arrangement, recognizing that Darcy's organizational skills were worth accommodating. "It won't be easy," Darcy acknowledged as they prepared for bed that night. "Balancing everything." "Nothing worthwhile ever is," Cole replied, drawing her into his arms. "But we'll face it together." The winter of 1879 proved milder than the previous year, a blessing for which both were grateful. Cole's delivery business thrived, expanding to include regular freight runs to Helena and the growing settlements along the Missouri River. Darcy continued her work at the general store while overseeing improvements to the homestead, including a new chicken coop and preparations for a larger garden in the spring. By February, they had saved enough to purchase 4 breeding cows and a bull, the beginning of the herd Thomas had once dreamed of building. Darcy insisted on naming the animals after characters from the novels she loved, resulting in the unlikely sight of Cole calling to Jane Eyre and Mr. Darcy across the snowy pasture. "You're making me look foolish in front of the other ranchers," he complained good-naturedly as they fed the animals one frosty morning. "The other ranchers would be lucky to have such well-bred cattle," Darcy retorted, her breath clouding in the winter air. Their laughter mingled in the cold, a warm counterpoint to the crystalline beauty surrounding them. In such moments, Cole marveled at how completely his life had changed in less than a year. The restlessness that had driven him for so long was gone, replaced by a deep contentment he had never thought possible. Spring brought new beginnings, including the news that Darcy was expecting their first child. The announcement came on a warm April evening as they sat on their porch swing, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of pink and gold. "Cole," Darcy said, taking his hand and placing it on her still, flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Joy and fear surged through him in equal measure. "Are you sure?" She nodded, her eyes shining. "Doc Wilson confirmed it yesterday when I was in town. He says the baby should arrive in November." Cole pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. "A baby," he whispered, awe in his voice. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Darcy asked, a hint of vulnerability in her question. "Happier than I ever thought possible," he assured her. "And terrified. And excited. And about 100 other things I can't even name." She laughed softly. "That makes 2 of us." The pregnancy brought changes to their routine. Cole hired a young man from town to help with the longer delivery routes, allowing him to stay closer to home. Darcy reduced her hours at the store, working only 2 days a week and focusing more on the homestead and preparations for the baby. Their cabin, once a place of grief and hunger, transformed into a home filled with love and anticipation. Cole built a cradle from pine harvested on their land, while Darcy sewed tiny garments from fabric bought with her store wages. Together they added a second bedroom, working side by side as they had since the beginning. "Do you ever miss it?" Darcy asked one evening in late summer as they sat on their expanded porch, her body heavy, with child beside him. "The wandering, I mean." Cole considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it, having only myself to worry about, being able to move on when things got complicated." He placed his hand on her rounded belly, feeling their child kick against his palm. "But I'd trade 1,000 lifetimes of wandering for 1 day of this. Of us." Darcy leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm glad you stopped in Silver Creek. Glad you took those 3 jobs." "Best decision I ever made," Cole said, echoing Sheriff Murphy's words from months before. though I could have done without Doc Wilson's backlog of firewood. Pretty sure my arms are still sore. Their daughter, Catherine Rose Matthews, was born on a snowy November night with Doc Wilson attending and Mrs. Henderson assisting. After hours of labor that left Cole pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door, the piercing cry of a newborn cut through the night, followed by Darcy's exhausted laughter. When he was finally allowed inside, Cole found Darcy propped against pillows, her face glowing despite her fatigue, a small bundle cradled in her arms. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Cole approached with reverence, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. Darcy folded back the blanket to reveal a tiny, perfect face with a dusting of dark hair. "She is your hair," Darcy murmured. "And your stubborn chin," Cole replied, gently touching the baby's cheek with one finger. As if recognizing his touch, Catherine opened her eyes, revealing irises of deepest blue. She regarded him solemnly for a moment before her face crumpled into a yawn. "Hello, little one," Cole whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Welcome home." In that moment, with his wife and daughter safe beside him, Cole understood completely why he had taken those 3 jobs, why he had worked himself to exhaustion through those early months in Silver Creek. Not just to ensure Darcy never went hungry again, but to build this a family, a home, a future filled with love and possibility. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing their land in pristine white, while inside, the small family huddled together in the warmth of their cabin, their hearts full and their dreams no longer deferred but lived, day by precious day. 5 years later, Cole stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching as Darcy chased their laughing children across the yard. Catherine, now a spirited 5-year-old with her father's dark hair and her mother's determined chin, led the way, while 3-year-old Thomas, named for the man who had loved Darcy first, toddled after his sister on chubby legs. The homestead had prospered beyond their initial hopes. The small herd had grown to 30 head of cattle, grazing on expanded pastureland. The garden had become a proper farm, producing enough vegetables to sell regularly in Silver Creek and occasionally in Helena. Darcy still worked at the general store 1 day a week, more to maintain her connection to town life than from financial necessity. Cole's delivery business had evolved into Matthews Freight and Supply, employing 3 riders besides himself and running regular routes throughout the territory. He had built a small office in Silver Creek, managed by a capable young woman when he was on the road or working the homestead. As he watched his family, Cole reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The lonely, starving widow and the restless drifter, both broken in their own ways, finding healing and purpose in each other. The 3 jobs that had begun as necessity and become the foundation for their shared life. Darcy caught him watching and paused, her cheeks flushed with exertion and joy. She said something to Catherine, who nodded seriously before taking her brother's hand and leading him toward the chicken coop to collect eggs. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious?" Darcy asked as she joined Cole on the porch, slipping her arm around his waist. "Just counting my blessings," he replied, pulling her close. "And thinking about how it all started. With you riding up to deliver supplies I hadn't ordered?" There was a teasing lilt to her voice. "With me taking 3 jobs to make sure you never went hungry again," Cole corrected gently. "Best work I ever did." Darcy raised her face to his, her blue eyes clear and loving. "And now look at us. 2 beautiful children, a thriving homestead, a successful business. And more importantly," Cole added, brushing a kiss against her temple, "a home. A real home." As their children returned, proudly bearing eggs in their small hands, Cole felt a contentment so deep it seemed to radiate from his very bones. The wanderer had found his place, the widow had found new love, and together they had built something neither could have imagined alone. "Daddy, look," Catherine called, carefully displaying her gathered treasures. "I found 7 eggs, and I didn't break any. And I found 2. Thomas announced, though his basket showed evidence of at least one casualty. "Well done, both of you," Cole praised, crouching down to their level. "Those will make a fine breakfast tomorrow." As the family moved inside together to prepare the evening meal, Cole caught Darcy's gaze over their children's heads. The love he saw there, steady and true, was worth every hour of exhaustion, every ache from chopping wood, every night patrol through Silver Creek's quiet streets. He had taken 3 jobs to make sure she never went hungry again, but in the process, he had filled a hunger in himself he hadn't even recognized for home, for family, for a love that would last a lifetime. And as night fell over their Montana homestead, wrapping them in its peaceful embrace, Cole knew with absolute certainty that some journeys weren't meant to continue endlessly forward, but to circle back to the place where the heart finally, truly belongs.